Hello friends. Welcome to Luxury Stories, the ultimate destination for lovers of high-end experiences, opulent lifestyles, and untold tales of extravagance. Your support means the world to us. Please do well to hit that subscription button and turn on the notification bell to get notified on our subsequent stories. Don't forget to like and share with friends. Now, relax and enjoy the story. Linda Donovan stood in front of her office window, gazing at the city skyline she had helped shape. At only 32 years old, Linda was already a prominent real estate mogul. She wore her usual modest attire, an elegant blouse and tailored trousers that reflected her understated style. The only outward sign of her affluence was the gleaming pair of diamond stud earrings her late grandmother had given her. Everything else about Linda radiated humility and calm. Outside her office door, her secretary's voice could be heard politely scheduling meetings. Linda's company, LD Estates, had just finalized a project for a luxury housing complex. Yet she never boasted of her success. Her employees admired her for being soft-spoken, understanding, and approachable despite her massive achievements. That evening, Linda's day ended earlier than usual, allowing her to head home. She smiled as she drove through the gates of what appeared to be a lavish mansion. Tall iron gates opened to a long driveway lined with manicured hedges and flower beds. The mansion itself was modern, though with a touch of traditional architecture. Its large glass windows gleamed under the fading sunlight. Inside the mansion, Charles Donovan, her husband, was pacing back and forth in the living room. Charles always acted charming and humble in public, especially around Linda's business associates. She believed him to be a caring partner. To outside observers, he seemed like an ideal husband, a supportive, mild-mannered man who stood behind a powerful wife. But cracks in that perfect picture were beginning to show. Charles often showed signs of jealousy whenever Linda celebrated a professional victory. He would attempt to mask it. Yet Linda sometimes sensed a shift in his behavior, a flinch, a tightened jaw, or an avoidance of eye contact. Still, she hoped their love and partnership would override any envy. When Linda stepped inside, Charles plastered on a broad smile. He opened his arms wide as though greeting the love of his life. "Welcome home, honey," he said, giving her a hug. "How was your day?" "It was good, Charles," Linda replied, letting out a tired sigh. "We finally closed the deal on the Serena Estate project." "I'm so relieved," Charles nodded, trying to look enthusiastic, but Linda noticed the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. "That's wonderful. Congratulations." He patted her shoulder in what she recognized was a slightly forced gesture. They moved to the living room couch, an expensive leather piece Linda had purchased, where they sat side by side. The mansion was officially listed under Linda's name, though she had allowed Charles to manage many affairs around the property. She wanted him to feel equal in their marriage. Linda's belief was that a husband, by tradition and respect, should have some responsibility in their joint home. So she gave Charles the job of overseeing renovations, staff, and security details. "Well," Linda said softly, "I think we should celebrate this weekend. Maybe have a small gathering with some of my colleagues. I want everyone to see how supportive and welcoming you are." Charles nodded. "Of course. Just let me know what you need. I'll handle it." Relief washed over Linda's face. She was happy her husband seemed agreeable, although she sometimes wondered if his quick compliance came from genuine support or something else. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, warning her that success often breeds jealousy in those closest to you. Linda brushed off the thought. She adored Charles and believed in his goodness. As they ate dinner, Linda asked Charles how his day had gone. He offered vague answers about running some errands, never specifying the details. She suspected he wanted to avoid highlighting that he wasn't quite as successful in his ventures. She didn't mind. Their partnership didn't require him to compete. Love, she thought, was enough. That night, while Linda slept soundly, Charles lay awake staring at the ceiling. "I need to make sure everyone believes I'm the true owner of this place," he murmured under his breath. Unknown to Linda, Charles had been boasting to his mother about the grand property, claiming that he, Charles Donovan, had made the wealth for their lavish lifestyle. He was about to set a chain of events in motion that would soon test Linda's quiet strength to its limits. A few mornings later, Linda was in her upstairs office, reviewing paperwork. She planned to expand her philanthropic foundation to fund local community clinics. The doorbell rang, echoed by the distant voices of household staff greeting someone. Moments later, Charles stepped into the office with a beaming smile. "Linda, my mother has arrived. She's downstairs with her suitcases, and she'll be staying with us for a while." Linda stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Oh, that's wonderful." She was genuinely pleased, for she wanted to bond with her mother-in-law. "Let's go welcome her properly." They went downstairs, where Linda found an older woman who carried herself with an air of quiet scrutiny. Mrs. Donovan had gray streaks in her hair, and she wore a conservative dress. Her sharp eyes scanned the foyer and living room, missing not a single detail of the opulent decor. "Hello, Mrs. Donovan," Linda said in a gentle tone. "It's so nice to finally have you here. Welcome to our home." Mrs. Donovan regarded Linda carefully before replying. "Thank you, dear. Where should I place my bags?" Linda turned to one of the housemaids. "Mary, please help Mrs. Donovan bring her things upstairs to the guest suite." She then faced her mother-in-law again. "I've prepared a lovely room for you. It has its own bathroom and a small lounge area, so you'll be comfortable." Mrs. Donovan gave a tight-lipped smile and nodded. "I see. Thank you." As the two women walked deeper into the house, Linda tried to make conversation. "I do hope you'll feel at home. If there's anything you need, please let me know." They reached the guest suite, an exquisitely decorated bedroom with a large window overlooking the gardens. Mrs. Donovan set her purse on the bed. She took a moment to look around. "This is rather grand," she said, then glanced at Charles as though to confirm that he truly owned this splendor. Charles responded with a proud grin, stepping forward as if to display the room like a prize. "Yes, Mother, I told you it was a nice place," he said, casually slipping an arm around Linda's waist. "We've worked hard for it." Hearing the phrase, "we've worked hard for it," Linda smiled. She appreciated that Charles was speaking as though their accomplishments were shared. Mrs. Donovan, meanwhile, nodded approvingly, still scanning the details of the bed, furniture, and the tall glass windows. Internally, Linda dismissed any strange vibes. She was eager to be on good terms with her mother-in-law, believing that a strong family unit was essential. She decided to focus on being as warm and respectful as possible. As Linda left the room to give mother and son some time alone, Mrs. Donovan turned to Charles. "This is absolutely beautiful. I'm so proud of you, Charles," she said. "I can't believe how successful you've become. I remember the small apartment you used to live in." Charles, looking somewhat smug, replied, "Things have changed for the better. Now you can see how far I've come." Mrs. Donovan patted his arm. "Yes, I see. Thank you for having me. It's a good thing you decided to settle down with a modest girl like Linda. At least she can take care of household chores and everything else. You have enough on your plate, being the man of this mansion." Charles nodded, swallowing a nervous lump in his throat. He had never told his mother that Linda was the true owner and the primary breadwinner. He relished in his mother's praise, despite the gnawing knowledge that he was basking in a lie. Downstairs, Linda busied herself ensuring Mrs. Donovan's dinner was set to her liking. She asked the cook to prepare lighter meals, knowing older people often preferred gentler flavors. Linda's heart was full of genuine hospitality, completely unaware that the deception Charles had spun would soon cause tensions to rise. In the days that followed, Mrs. Donovan began to settle into the Donovan mansion, but she did so with a sense of entitlement. Early one morning, Linda noticed Mrs. Donovan instructing a gardener to move potted plants from one side of the front yard to the other. The gardener looked confused but obeyed, while Mrs. Donovan pointed out exactly where she wanted each plant. When Linda gently approached, Mrs. Donovan waved her hand dismissively. "I'm making the garden look more proper," she said. "Don't you think it's better this way?" Linda tried to smile. "Yes, of course, Mrs. Donovan. I only worry that the gardener might need to check with me or Charles first to ensure everything matches the planned layout." Mrs. Donovan tilted her chin up. "I believe my son owns this place, so I have every right to make improvements. Don't you agree?" Caught off guard, Linda simply murmured, "Yes, I understand." Inside, Linda was puzzled by the statement. She reminded herself that Mrs. Donovan was family, and she wanted to be respectful. Over the next few days, she observed more unsettling behavior. Mrs. Donovan complained about the household staff's cleaning methods and insisted on rearranging furniture. She also commented on Linda's professional life, implying that a proper wife should spend more time at home than at work. You really should cook more often for Charles, Mrs. Donovan remarked one afternoon when she found Linda reviewing contract documents on the kitchen counter. Men want a wife who knows her way around the kitchen, not one who's busy with files all day. Linda blushed, setting aside her papers. I do cook occasionally, Mrs. Donovan. But my job is important to me. Charles and I have an arrangement that works for us. Mrs. Donovan frowned, but changed the subject. Linda felt a twinge of guilt, even though she knew there was nothing wrong with a woman having a thriving career. Meanwhile, Charles observed these interactions in silence. He never corrected his mother, never mentioned that Linda was, in fact, the true source of their wealth. He sometimes fed into his mother's assumptions, offering half-smiles or simply looking away when Mrs. Donovan berated Linda. One evening, Linda decided to speak to Charles about her concerns. They were in the living room after dinner, Mrs. Donovan having retired to her suite. Linda turned off the TV and faced her husband. Charles, she began softly, I'm worried your mother thinks you own this house. It's making her act as if she has all the authority here. Charles feigned ignorance. What do you mean? She knows we own it together, I'm sure. Linda frowned. Are you certain she knows that? She persisted, gently. She acts like I'm just a tenant or something. Charles shrugged. She's old-fashioned, Linda. She believes the man is the head of the household. Just let her be. She'll calm down eventually. Taking a deep breath, Linda nodded, deciding to let the matter rest for now. But a small seed of doubt was planted in her mind. She suspected that Charles was enjoying being seen as the wealthy provider. As she lay in bed that night, trying to find sleep, her thoughts swirled with anxiety. Still, she resolved to be patient, believing in her husband's goodness. A few days later, Linda decided to host a small party for her business partners to celebrate the closing of a significant contract. It was a chance for everyone to gather in a relaxed environment, away from boardrooms and negotiation tables. She hoped Charles's humility would shine through as the gracious host she always believed him to be. On the day of the party, the mansion buzzed with activity. Caterers set up buffet stations in the spacious backyard, overlooking a swimming pool. Waiters moved in and out of the kitchen carrying trays of appetizers. Musicians tuned their instruments in a corner of the lawn. Linda roamed around, checking that each detail was perfectly arranged. She also tried to make sure her mother-in-law was comfortable, though Mrs. Donovan mostly seemed preoccupied with giving the staff extra orders. By mid-afternoon, the guests began arriving, dressed in smart casual outfits. They mingled and marveled at the architecture and landscaping. Many knew Linda was wealthy, but few understood the full extent of her empire. Some approached Charles, congratulating him on his beautiful home. Charles soaked up the compliments. Yes, thank you, he would say with a proud smile. Several times, Linda caught Mrs. Donovan boasting about how Charles had done a fantastic job acquiring the mansion. Linda tried not to let it bother her. She reasoned that there was no need to correct every comment. Her life's work spoke for itself, and she had nothing to prove. During a lull in the party, Grace, Linda's longtime friend and legal advisor, pulled her aside. Grace was a poised woman who had helped Linda with many real estate contracts over the years. She wore a concerned expression. Linda, are you all right? Grace asked, scanning Linda's face. You seem a bit tense today. Linda sighed, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. It's Charles's mother. She believes Charles is the owner of this house, and she's become so critical of me. I'm trying to keep the peace, but it's tough. Grace frowned. Does Charles correct her? Not really, Linda admitted. He says it doesn't matter, that she'll get used to me eventually. But it's getting uncomfortable. Grace placed a reassuring hand on Linda's arm. Take care of yourself. You've worked hard for everything you have. Don't let anyone diminish you. Linda nodded. I'll be fine, she said, summoning a small smile. I just want everyone to enjoy the day. The party proceeded, filled with polite conversation, laughter, and clinking glasses. Yet Linda couldn't shake the tension swirling inside her. While her colleagues praised the house, she noticed Charles walk from group to group, giving the impression that he was responsible for this luxury. And Mrs. Donovan kept a watchful eye on Linda, silently disapproving every time Linda stopped to talk about work with her partners. At one point, Linda overheard Mrs. Donovan grumble, "These fancy business friends of hers. I hope they don't lead her astray. A wife should stay close to home." Hurt but unwilling to cause a scene, Linda focused on greeting her guests politely. She reminded herself to remain composed. This was a special day for her professional achievements. After all, her face wore a confident smile, hiding the turmoil underneath. Days turned into weeks, and Mrs. Donovan's overbearing attitude continued to build tension. Linda tried her best to maintain her composure, determined to keep the peace for Charles's sake. However, everything reached a breaking point one afternoon when Linda returned from work. Linda pulled her car into the driveway, stepping out with a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She paused, confused, at the sight of several suitcases and boxes piled near the mansion's front steps. A few of her clothing items, shirts, shoes, even a winter coat, were strewn on the ground. Before she had time to process what she was seeing, Mrs. Donovan emerged from the front door, her expression livid. "Get out of here, you gold digger!" Mrs. Donovan yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Linda. "I won't have you leeching off my son any longer." Linda stood rooted in shock. She couldn't believe that her mother-in-law was tossing her belongings out of her own home. Quickly regaining her composure, Linda carefully set down her laptop bag and approached Mrs. Donovan, voice shaking but respectful. "What is going on, Mrs. Donovan? Why are my things outside?" Mrs. Donovan placed her hands on her hips. "Because you don't belong here. You're nothing but a lazy, money-grubbing woman. I've seen the way you prance around, acting like you own the world, when it's my son who's worked hard for everything. You got your claws into him just for comfort and luxury." "Mrs. Donovan, please," Linda managed, struggling to keep her voice level. Her heart pounded painfully. "That's not true, and you're throwing away my clothes. This is my home too." At that moment, Charles appeared in the doorway, arms folded across his chest. Linda's eyes pleaded with him, desperate for him to intervene, to end this madness. Instead, he wore a cold expression. "Charles, tell your mother this is unacceptable," Linda said softly, tears threatening to escape. "You know this is my house too. Please stop this." Charles swallowed, glancing at his mother. Instead of defending Linda, he said, "Linda, I think it's best you leave. My mother is right. We don't need you pretending to run things here. If you really care about me, you won't fight it. Just gather your belongings and go." Linda's chest tightened. She felt an almost physical pain from this betrayal. So all this time, Charles had been lying to both his mother and to Linda. He was now openly supporting Mrs. Donovan's brutal eviction, believing Linda would silently retreat and leave the mansion, presumably so they could claim it fully as their own. Words failed her for a moment. She looked from Charles to Mrs. Donovan. The older woman glowered at her, practically trembling with rage. Linda took a deep breath, carefully picking up some of her clothes and stuffing them into her bag. She wanted to avoid escalating the confrontation, for her own dignity and safety. "Fine," Linda said at last, voice steady despite the tears gleaming in her eyes. "I'll go. But this isn't over." She turned and walked back to her car, clothes in hand. She could feel Mrs. Donovan's triumphant stare on her back. Charles watched, expression unreadable, as she drove out of the gates. Once outside, Linda parked at a nearby gas station just to compose herself. She wept silently for a few minutes, thinking of how everything had flipped in an instant. Yet amid the heartbreak, Linda's mind sharpened with clarity. She wasn't the helpless victim Charles and his mother assumed she was. She realized she had powerful legal rights. This house was, in fact, registered under her name, and she had the means to prove it. She picked up her phone and dialed Grace. "I need your help," Linda said through clenched teeth. "Charles and his mother just threw me out of my own home." That evening, Linda spent the night in a luxury hotel suite she owned through her company. She paced the carpeted floor, phone in hand, speaking to Grace and the rest of her legal team. The tears had dried, replaced by a calm determination. She recounted the eviction scene in detail, careful to note the personal items that Mrs. Donovan had thrown out. Grace's voice on the other end was steady and supportive. "Linda, this is clearly illegal. You can't be evicted from your own property, especially not by someone who doesn't even hold any stake in it. Let's gather the necessary documents first. We'll get an injunction, and if needed, we'll have the police assist." Linda listened, nodding to herself. "Yes, thank you, Grace. I plan to go back as early as tomorrow morning. I can't let them take advantage of me." She ended the call, feeling a surge of courage. The heartbreak of Charles's betrayal still weighed on her, but she refused to let that overshadow her right to her property. Quiet as she was, Linda had fought many battles in her career. She knew how to stand her ground when it mattered. Before heading to bed, Linda wrote a brief letter to Charles on her phone, not sending it, just drafting. In it, she expressed her sorrow at how he had repaid her kindness. She also warned him that the law would be on her side. Then she deleted the letter, deciding she would let legal action speak for her. That night, she slept fitfully but woke with a sense of purpose. She dressed in a crisp blouse and trousers, ready for the confrontation to come. After a quick breakfast, she met Grace in front of the hotel lobby. Together, they drove to the district courthouse to finalize the eviction notice, this time aimed at Charles and Mrs. Donovan. The following morning, Linda arrived at the mansion gates in a black SUV. Grace was in the passenger seat, and two uniformed security officers followed in a separate vehicle. Linda's pulse raced as she instructed the guard at the gate to open it. The guard hesitated, seemingly under instructions from Charles or Mrs. Donovan. But once Linda presented her identification and property documents, the guard had no choice but to comply. Inside the sprawling driveway, Charles and Mrs. Donovan emerged from the house, both looking startled. Linda stepped out of her SUV calmly, a folder of legal paperwork in hand, while Grace remained beside her, ready to speak on her behalf if necessary. Charles took a step forward, confusion twisting his features. "Linda, what are you doing here with security?" Mrs. Donovan's gaze flicked nervously from Linda to the officers, then to Grace, who carried a confident air. Linda cleared her throat, her voice unwavering. "Charles, Mrs. Donovan, I am here to inform you both that you have no legal right to evict me from my own property. And as the rightful owner of this mansion, I am now asking you to leave." Mrs. Donovan's eyes bulged. She looked to Charles for explanation. "What does she mean, her own property? Charles, what is this nonsense?" Charles stammered. He glanced at Linda's folder, knowing exactly what it contained, documents proving her ownership. Grace stepped forward, pulling out the deed and the property papers. She handed copies to Charles. "These are certified records from the local land registry. The mansion is legally owned by Linda Donovan. All the taxes and bills have always been paid from her accounts. Your attempts to force her out are illegal." Mrs. Donovan's face went pale. "Charles, you told me you bought this house. You said Linda was just living off you." Charles had no response. His face burned with embarrassment and anger. He looked at Linda, who met his gaze with calm resolve. Linda continued, addressing both of them. "I was willing to share everything with you, Charles, because I loved you. I never boasted about my money because I believed our relationship was built on honesty, not greed. But you betrayed that trust." Grace nodded to the security officers, who promptly informed Charles and Mrs. Donovan that they needed to vacate the premises. They were allowed time to pack their belongings, but were asked to do so immediately. Mrs. Donovan, still in shock, sputtered, "This can't be real. There must be some mistake. Charles, we can't lose everything." Charles glared at Linda. "How can you do this? You claim you loved me, but now you're throwing me out like I'm nothing." Hearing those words, Linda almost faltered. The truth was, she had loved Charles deeply, but his willingness to humiliate her in front of his mother and allow her eviction was too great a betrayal. She hardened her heart. "You did this to yourself," she replied, voice quiet. "You were counting on my silence and humility. You thought I wouldn't fight back. You were wrong." Charles had no immediate answer. Linda watched as he and Mrs. Donovan stormed back into the house to pack. While they did so, Linda checked the rooms, verifying the state of her property. She found that many of her personal items had been carelessly tossed aside. Yet she breathed a small sigh of relief, knowing she now had control over the situation again. As Charles and Mrs. Donovan dragged their suitcases to the driveway, Linda stood on the porch. She wore a stoic expression, arms folded lightly. Grace was by her side, along with the security personnel who kept a watchful eye. Mrs. Donovan's face was tear-streaked and weary. Approaching Linda with hesitant steps, she pleaded, "Linda, I'm so sorry. I truly had no idea. Charles told me a different story altogether. I thought you were the one taking advantage of him." Linda looked at Mrs. Donovan, her heart torn. Part of her wanted to forgive. After all, this was her husband's mother. Yet she recalled the sting of being called a gold digger and seeing her clothes thrown onto the driveway. "I understand that you were told lies," Linda replied, voice measured. "But you still hurt me. You never stop to truly understand who I am. You only believe Charles's claims." Mrs. Donovan reached out, as if to place a hand on Linda's arm, but Linda stepped back. I was foolish," Mrs. Donovan admitted, bowing her head. "Please, let me stay. We can work this out." Tears welled up in Linda's eyes, but she blinked them away. "I'm sorry. I can't have you both here anymore. Not after what's happened." Charles stood nearby, watching the exchange with a scowl. He threw his suitcase into the trunk of his car. Turning to Linda, he said bitterly, "You'll regret this. You needed me." Linda's composure flickered, but she remained resolute. "Did I? You made it clear that you only cared about what I could give you. I need people in my life who respect me." With that, Charles slammed the car door. He and Mrs. Donovan had nowhere immediate to go, but they had no choice but to leave. Linda stood in the front yard, her posture unwavering as she watched them drive away. Charles and Mrs. Donovan spent the night in a low-budget hotel on the outskirts of the city. The room was cramped and dimly lit, a sharp contrast to the lavish Donovan mansion. Mrs. Donovan sat at the small table, head in her hands. Charles paced back and forth, rage simmering beneath his posture. "How could you have misled me like that?" Mrs. Donovan demanded, lifting her head to glare at her son. "All this time, you let me believe you owned everything." Charles ran a hand over his hair, frustration etched on his features. "I thought I had it under control. Linda was always so quiet, so willing to let me handle things. I never imagined she'd strike back like this." Mrs. Donovan huffed. "Strike back? She only did what any owner would do after being treated so cruelly." She paused, her tone softening. "Why did you lie to me? I'm your mother." Charles sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "Because I didn't want you to see me as a failure. Linda was wealthy when I met her, but she never made a show of it. I thought if you believed I was successful, you'd be proud." Mrs. Donovan let out a shaky breath. She reflected on her own behavior. "We both treated Linda terribly. I insulted her, called her names, and threw her belongings out. I just feel so ashamed now." Silence fell between them. For the first time in years, Charles felt the full weight of his deception. He realized Linda had never belittled him for not earning as much. She had quietly given him authority in their home, trusting he would handle it with honesty. Instead, he let pride lead him to betrayal. Eventually, Charles reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Linda's number. He hesitated, then called. It rang several times, but Linda did not pick up. He left a voice message, his voice tight with remorse. "Linda, I'm sorry. Please call me back. I need to talk to you." Yet he suspected she might never reply. Meanwhile, Linda walked through the grand halls of the Donovan mansion, her mansion, observing each room with a renewed sense of ownership. She asked the staff to remove some of Charles's personal items, carefully boxing them for safekeeping in case he ever requested them. She directed the household to change the security codes and locks. That same day, she had a locksmith install new systems on every door. When evening came, Linda sat alone on the patio, watching the sunset gild the gardens in soft, orange light. She felt a swirl of emotions: sorrow over the end of her relationship, relief at regaining control of her life, and a steady determination to move forward. In the days that followed, Linda poured her energy into her real estate business and philanthropic foundation. She announced new initiatives to fund housing projects in low-income areas. She also donated a portion of her personal wealth to support job training programs, hoping to offer opportunities to those less fortunate. Though she was private by nature, Linda found solace in helping others. At one point, Linda's phone buzzed with multiple missed calls from Charles. She read the messages he left, each more desperate than the last. He claimed to be sorry, begging her to let him return. She considered responding, but every time she recalled the memory of her belongings strewn across the driveway, her resolve returned. She needed to protect herself from that kind of emotional harm. Word of Linda's eviction of Charles spread among close circles, and some tried to gossip, painting Linda as heartless or vengeful. But her close friends, and the employees who had seen firsthand what happened, knew the truth. Gradually, support for Linda overshadowed any rumors. Grace visited one afternoon for tea, and Linda confided in her. "Part of me wants to forgive and forget, but I know I can't trust Charles anymore." Grace nodded, setting her cup down. "Forgiveness doesn't mean letting him hurt you again. You can forgive in your heart, while still keeping him at a distance. Linda thanked her friend for the advice. That same day, Linda instructed her accounting department to finalize a one-time settlement for Charles. It wasn't an extravagant sum, but it was enough to help him and his mother find a new place to live. She wanted to end this chapter without bitterness or endless legal disputes. A week later, Linda's lawyer informed Charles of the settlement. He reluctantly accepted, knowing he had few other options. Mrs. Donovan, humbled by the experience, sent Linda a handwritten note apologizing again for her actions. She didn't expect forgiveness, she wrote, but wanted Linda to know she now understood how wrong she had been. Linda breathed deeply, reading the letter. She said a silent prayer, wishing them both well in their new lives. Then she refocused on her own life. She reorganized the mansion, redecorating spaces to reflect her personal style, a blend of calm neutrals and tasteful art. At last, the house felt truly hers. On a peaceful evening, Linda wandered the garden, stopping by the fountain where blooming flowers reached toward the night sky. She saw her reflection in the water, a strong woman who had faced betrayal, yet had emerged with dignity and newfound self-assurance. She recalled her grandmother's teaching, that wealth and humility can coexist, but they require wisdom and boundaries to protect oneself from those who seek to exploit. At the end of the day, Linda entered the house, which now felt warm and inviting rather than tense. As she prepared a simple meal in the kitchen, she allowed a small smile to play on her lips. Though the path had been painful, she realized this was the beginning of a happier, healthier future, one where she remained quiet in demeanor, yet powerful in resolve, never again letting anyone mistake her kindness for weakness. Thanks for watching. If you find this story interesting, do well to hit the subscription button and turn on the notification bell for our subsequent stories. Don't forget to like and share this video to others. See you in our next story.